neighbors too. There'll be nobody left behind to grieve, and we will all go together when we go. What a comforting fact that is to know. Universal bereavement and inspiring achievement. Yes, we all will go together when we go. We will all go together when we go. All suffused with an incandescent glow. No one will have the endurance to collect on his insurance. Lloyds of London will be loaded when they go.
This is Jim Fetzer, your host on The Raw Deal, where I'm very pleased to have as my featured guest today, Jack Mullin, who along with his colleague Stephanie Sledge have been doing great things at the government rag. I've republished many of their blogs at jamesfetzer.blogspot.com. I wanted to have Jack on now, especially because he was about to go on the Power Hour. This is about a week or a few days more ago when they canceled him out. It's very shocking to me. I've appeared on that show many times when Joyce Riley was alive and well. It was thriving. They had 3 hours in the morning. When Joyce and I were on together, we would rank number 3 nationwide, behind Glenn Beck and Laura Ingraham, who now has a television show that's thriving on Fox News. And when Daniel took over with Joyce's lamentable demise, they moved it back to the afternoon, cut it down to 2 hours, and now it appears they're even running interference with what guests appear on the show. Jack, welcome to The Raw Deal.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for that introduction. I just want to make sure, can you hear me all right?
We can hear you just fine, Jack.
Okay, good. And Stephanie tells me I don't say thegovernmentrag.com enough, so I will plug it now and recommend that folks head on over to thegovernmentrag.com so they can read some of these articles. And I appreciate the fact that you publish my articles as well. I don't know how to thank you. You publish some of my stuff in your books. And anyway, back to the Power Hour. They got back to me later and said that they wanted to reschedule with no explanation for what happened. They shut down the whole show, not just me. I guess when Daniel came back from his vacation, he got to do the first hour of his show, but then, he was told that it was over and they were going to run some sort of rerun. So I don't know what happened there, and I haven't rescheduled, but I did get a little talk with their producer after that happened, and she said that, a lot of things have been changed about the way the Power Hour is being treated, and they're not happy about that. So,
well,
I don't know what happened.
Jack, you're talking about Catherine, with whom I have a very cordial relationship. What did Daniel cover in the first hour before you were canceled? Were you able to take it in?
Yes, I was, and I was going to argue with him over that. He was talking about what a great idea it was to get out of the Iran nuclear deal, and that Iran was, I guess he bought the Netanyahu story that Iran had been cheating, and that Trump had come to the rescue and kicked him out. And I'm not. I mean, I think Daniel's an excellent talk show host, but he was relying heavily on some form of Christian Zionist viewpoint.
And, right, we all know Bibi was recycling old news, nothing new, old records, just to create a pretext for Trump to reinforce his decision. I thought it was embarrassingly bad. Everyone who studied the Iran deal knows Iran gave up its projects to develop nuclear weapons in 2003 with the demise of Saddam Hussein. We had the highest-ranking officials of the American government announcing to the world that Saddam was seeking to develop nuclear weapons. Vice President Cheney, Condoleezza Rice, Scooter Libby, a host of others. I mean, it would have been irresponsible for Iran not to take those warnings seriously, especially after the calamitous war from 1980 to 88, which the U.S. instigated, where Iraq attacked Iran and both sides lost over 1 million. I think if Iran hadn't at that point in time sought to develop nuclear weapons, it would have been utterly irresponsible. But with Saddam's demise, they abandoned it. Our own intel agencies concluded in 2007 Iran was not pursuing nuclear weapons, which they reaffirmed in 2011. Even the Mossad came aboard in 2012 that Iran was not pursuing nuclear weapons, although Bibi Netanyahu, true to form, went to the UN a few weeks later and asserted precisely the opposite. He's a used car salesman. He's a phony, a liar, a cheat. He's one of the most disgraceful human beings on the face of earth. And, of course, I think there's an explanation, namely, he's a Talmudic Jew. He believes in Jewish superiority. As I've been explaining in many contexts, there are good Jews and bad Jews, just as there are good Muslims and bad Muslims, just as there are good Christians and bad Christians. Examples of bad Muslims are the Wahhabis in Saudi Arabia, who behead their opponents, the infidels, and turn their women into sex slaves. Bibi is a Likudnik and a Talmudic Jew who believes in Jewish superiority, that the Jews are so superior to other human races as all the human races together are superior to the animals in the fields, and that the Jews are entitled to lie, steal, cheat, and even kill the non-Jews, to whom they refer collectively as the Goyim. This is something they're entitled to do. Ariel Sharon was another, Menachem Begin another. Look up their quotes. You're going to be horrified. Where Ariel Sharon boasted after 9/11 that we own America and the Americans know it. Bibi believes America is to be used and abused by the Jews, the Talmudic Jews, the Likudniks, for their own benefit, and they don't care the cost to the United States. Jack, of this I have become completely 100% convinced.
I've been writing about it for a number of years, and I saw that Robert Kelly, who was a former inspector for the IAEA, had been he was on some Middle Eastern news program talking about Bibi's comment, and he said it was just childish or even cartoonish the way they had presented. I don't know if you saw it. They unveiled dozens and dozens of books, and said there were 50,000. Go ahead.
No, Jack. I'm just confirming what you're saying. Okay. I mean, Bibi is insulting. He takes the average intelligence of Americans to be about 8 years old. I mean, look at the cartoon he presented of the bomb for the nuclear weapon at the United Nations. He's an insulting guy. He's arrogant beyond belief. And he despises the United States. This is what every American has to understand.
I agree. And so Kelly's comment was that it was childish, and the agency itself commented that there was no credible evidence of any kind. And one of the things that's interesting that I think almost nobody thinks about is the fact that Iran will never be left alone as long as it doesn't have a nuclear weapon. I've written about this before, but I like it because it's mathematically simple.
Lay it out.
There's an article in a book, a really wonderful book edited by Hans Hermann Hope, one of the most profound libertarian writers himself. But he put together some articles, and one of the articles, or a collection of articles in a book, one of them was called "Nuclear Weapons: Proliferation or Monopoly." And that article was by a guy named Bertrand Lemencier. Anyway, he makes a few comments about nuclear weapons in the beginning, and noting that, for example, in 1945, the United States was the only country in the world with nuclear weapons. And, of course, the United States, they were called atomic weapons then, but the same principle, was the only country in the world to drop nuclear weapons. And then by 1949, the Soviet Union had nuclear weapons, the United Kingdom in 1952, France in 1962, China and India in 1974. And, of course, along the way, Israel got itself armed with nuclear weapons. But anyway, in this article, he uses a bit of game theory. It's a model that's a famous model. It's called the Hawk and Dove interaction and game theory model. But anyway, to summarize, he used this model to quickly develop a little formula that was based on the probability of war with the number of players. In this case, it would be nations. And you can see through the arguments and also the mathematics that the likelihood of war goes down as the number of people holding nuclear weapons goes up. And that's based on costs, costs of launching nuclear weapons and the benefits. And so you have the least possible chance of nuclear war when everybody's armed, and you have the most possible when only one person is armed.
Jack,
of course, we've seen that.
I'm just sitting here thinking about the parallel with gun control. The more people who have guns,
exactly.
the fewer the homicides occur. I mean, the American people have to understand this. The reason Japan did not invade the United States was because Emperor Hirohito's advisors told him it was a bad idea because there'd be a sniper behind every bush. Now you have some harebrained Democrats who want to take away our guns. We got one out in California who is openly advocating gun confiscation so that the United States, would no longer be able to defend itself. For example, China has an official standing army of over 2,500,000, but we in the United States have an unofficial army of over 100 million armed Americans. He wants to take that advantage away from us. So China, for example, could invade the United States to minimal resistance because we have been disarmed by these disloyal, traitorous Democrats. I hate to say it. I have most of my life voted Democratic. I voted twice for Bill Clinton. I voted twice for Barack Obama. But these people are despicable. They're trying to take away our guns. It wasn't made the Second Amendment for no good reason, but because the Founding Fathers knew we had to have the ability to defend ourselves from tyrants, as Judge Napolitano has observed. The Second Amendment doesn't protect your right to an assault weapon to shoot deer. It protects your right to an assault weapon to shoot tyrants. The American people have to understand this, Jack. I am so sick of these Democratic liberal nitwits who are promoting gun control and staging these phony attacks like Parkland and Las Vegas and Sandy Hook to instill fear into the American people so we'll get a warped impression of what's going on here. There are over 5 million AR-15s out here in the United States, and only 5 have ever been alleged to be used, and those included at Sandy Hook, Las Vegas, and Parkland, where nobody died. The whole thing was completely contrived. Jack, I'm just disgusted beyond belief.
Yeah, and so am I. And I've written so many articles on it that I don't think there's any point in any more. But what I like to do is each time I like to add some depth to it by, reading quotes from people who have, over the course of, say, the last 120 years or so, expressed the general theory that it would be possible to destroy the United States using a variety of techniques. For example, this idea is very easy to follow along if you get yourself a copy of the protocols from the learned elders of Zion. But when you call these people idiots or nitwits, but they don't even have any ability to think at all. They're simply second-hand thinkers who are being led through mind control and some sort of need for self-esteem in a group that itself is defective. They're finding some form of protection in their misfit toy group. And I listen to these people, like, for example, I just wrote an article called America's Red Flag Wake-Up Call. And in this article, I was talking about these red flag laws and how they're, insidious because they are another little chip in the stone of disarming Americans. Americans are not being disarmed because they're going to get safer. They're not being disarmed because there's any issue with increase in homicide rates. They're not being disarmed because anybody at all, for any purposes of calculation, die every year of a assault rifle shooting. They're being disarmed so that they can be harmed. That's the only reason you disarm someone. I mean, it's very dangerous to disarm or to try to harm someone who's armed. And so history shows us, South Africa shows us right now, when you disarm, you're destroyed. It's the beginning of genocide. You become marginalized, demonized. Whites are already demonized. They're considered racist simply by birth. If you're born white, you're racist. And we are given the historical title of the world's worst enslavers, creating all the war in the world, etc. And that's a technique that we've seen, like in Vietnam, when we needed to make the Vietnamese people look like something they were animals, so that when you're shooting them, it doesn't seem to matter. And then they animate these groups. Mostly they're women, but groups like Moms Demand Action. And these groups are not spontaneous. They're not organic. They're not grassroots. This is a KGB-style communist playbook for organizing opposition and creating strife, and for destroying civilizations through constant agitation. They make these useful idiot groups like Moms Demand Action, which is funded and created basically by Mayor Bloomberg, who's one of the Jews who are involved with the national Jewish agenda to disarm Americans. And that is not racist in any sense of the word. It is a fact. And all of even with the gun law of 1968, that was introduced by a Jew. And it was done so with the false flag shooting of JFK. It was supported with the false flag shooting of Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy. And each time they had a convenient assassination, the Jewish groups got out and marched and said, if we didn't have guns in the hands of Americans. Well, this plan is very, very old. If you go back to 1867 or so, when the Protocols of the Elders of Zion was first discovered, it is in there that they plan to use these techniques to both mentally disarm and physically disarm any population they so chose to do so with, which would have been, in our case, the Goyim. But in the United States, it's primarily white people, and it's the same thing that happened in Britain. It's the same thing that happened in Australia. They fell for the simplest false flag shooting, and then out of some sort of suicidal altruism, decided that they would be safer when they gave up their guns. In this article, I quote some woman who's talking about how we need a law like this. This would have protected her son who shot himself, and if they'd had a law where they could have come in and got his gun, he'd still be alive. And I want to pull this lady aside and say that it would have nothing to do with it at all. My own son shot himself. My own son bought his weapon the morning that he decided to take his life. And I know for a fact that these laws have no effect whatsoever on gun violence, except to make it go up. And if you look at the article itself, it's interesting that in 1950, in the days of Leave It to Beaver and Andy Griffith Show, we see homicide rates at about 5.1 persons per 100,000. But 1970, just 2 years after the 1968 gun control law, it pops up to 8.8, and then in 1980 it's 10.4, and then begins again to fall in the 90s and has settled again close to 5.1. So, it wasn't even the gun control law could probably point it at directly for the increase in homicide rates during those periods of time. And of course, in the 1990s, people began to arm themselves again. There's absolutely nothing intelligent or rational about thinking disarming yourself is going to make you more safe. And
that's very, very good,
to tell
Jack.
people that.
I like to emphasize that point, that most of these liberals are simply ignorant. They don't understand the facts. Yeah. They don't realize that gun ownership and homicide rates are inversely related. The greater the gun ownership, the lower the homicide rate. They assume falsely, and they never bother to check the facts, that the greater the number of guns, the greater the homicide rate, when it's the opposite. Worldwide, for example, the United States and Canada have among the highest gun ownership in the world, but also among the lowest homicide rates. Latin America, South America, Brazil, among the lowest gun ownership, among the highest homicide rates. Africa, among the lowest gun ownership, among the highest homicide rate. My God, are Americans so stupid they can't just look at Chicago and see what happens when you have these most stringent gun control laws in the country, and the gun violence is going so far out of range that you got a city councilman who wants to bring in the UN into Chicago? Jack, it's absurd.
It's incredible. And you take you look at Venezuela. I don't remember the year, somewhere around 2012. they introduced a new gun law to ban all commercial sales of firearms and ammunition. And according to Hugo Chavez, he said the ultimate aim is to disarm all civilians. And so you fast forward to 2018, and what do we see in Venezuela? We see death squads. We see news stories where there's just gangs of people running around killing people. An example, a death squad in rural Venezuela gunned down 11 people in cold blood at dawn Saturday in an ongoing gang dispute. Victims were told to get out of their three respective houses in a town, and they were then summarily executed. They were using a combination of shotguns and handguns to murder their targets. So obviously the gun law didn't affect the criminals, and all it did was leave everyone else entirely at their mercy.
Jack, are we so dumb that we don't understand that laws are obeyed by law-abiding citizens, that criminals are criminals because they are not law-abiding citizens? You can pass all the laws in the world, and the criminals aren't going to be affected. How dumb is that? And do Americans not understand that if they give up their right to self-defense, they're leaving it up to everyone else, whether they live or die? I mean, it's a disgrace, Jack. We have the most gullible population being promoted, this utter nonsense by a group that has no interest in the welfare of the United States or the well-being of American citizens.
Well, when you put together the teachings of the Talmud and the plan proposed by the protocols, you can see that this has to be done. In order to destroy large populations of Goyim, you're going to have to disarm them. And they've done a pretty good job of disarming the rest of the world. The United States is still holding on. I mean, white people have this pathological altruism, as Kevin McDonald talked about in the Occidental Observer, wherein they'll basically commit suicide. They now suffer from what I call morality of suicide, where they don't even care about their children. You can imagine a situation where you've got a family totally disarmed and they're all huddled around, and they hear noises outside. And what do they have to look forward to? What are they going to expect to happen? That cops are going to show up there in the first 10 minutes when all the dirty work's done? No, it's absolutely insane. And I think Americans that are supporting this stuff think that if they just keep giving in these false flag, traumatic mind controlling events, trauma-based mind control, which is state-sponsored terrorism, might go away. I think that they subconsciously believe that if they give up their weapons, they'll stop terrorizing them.
Jack, hold that thought. We'll be right back. Jim Fetzer, your host on The Raw Deal, with my special guest, Jack Mullin.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Was it a conspiracy? Did you know that the police in Boston were broadcasting "This is a drill, this is a drill" on bullhorns during the marathon? That the Boston Globe was tweeting that a demonstration bomb would be set off during the marathon for the benefit of bomb squad activities, and that one would be set off in 1 minute in front of the library, which happened as the Globe had announced. Peering through the smoke, you could see bodies with missing arms and legs, but there was no blood. The blood only showed up later and came out of a tube. They used amputee actors and a studio-quality smoke machine. Don't let yourself be played. Check out And Nobody Died in Boston Either. Available at moonrockbooks.com. That's moonrockbooks.com.
What the heck
is the truth jihad? Hey, I'm Kevin Barrett, host of Truth Jihad Radio. Federal prosecutors, Department of Homeland Security agents, and curious passersby often ask me, just what is this truth jihad thing anyway? Well, everybody knows what truth is, but jihad is a misunderstood term. Jihad means effort or struggle. The greater jihad is the struggle to be a better person, while the lesser jihad is the struggle to defend the community. Prophet Muhammad, peace upon him, did say that the best jihad is a word of truth flung in the face of a tyrant. And that's what we do here at Truth Jihad Radio. Every Friday, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern, 5 to 7 Pacific, right here on Revolution Radio.
Find some comfort at Willow's World. A variety of news, commentary, and poetry at Willow's Poetry Corner, where there are comfy cushions and a tempting selection of delectable comestibles. A show that's quirkily and quintessentially British, with a unique twist, featuring Willow Andreasen, your host. Join Willow, Monday, 6 to 8 p.m. EST, Studio B.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
This is Jim Fetzer, your host on The Raw Deal, with my special guest, Jack Mullin. Jack, your points are impeccable. Scholarly studies conducted by the University of Hawaii, their Democide project, have shown there were 19 genocides during the 20th century, each of which was preceded by gun confiscation. Traitors to the United States like this Democratic Representative Eric Swalwell from California's 15th District, who want to give up all of our guns, evidently want the United States to be number 20.
I'm sorry. I'm back on.
Yeah, you're here.
I don't know what happened to my phone, but it went away. So, in the wake of endless false flag shootings that Americans can't seem to wake up also and just see very quickly how easy it is to follow the steps and show that these things are fake. We find endless reference to this stuff, which I find the most aggravating. I mean, you take any article, you look at the Washington Post on February 16th, a guy named Lenny Bernstein, most likely Jewish. In the wake of massacres similar to Wednesday's school shooting in Parkland, Florida, a small number of states have passed red flag laws that allow the seizure of guns before people can commit acts of violence. Now, this is what? Preventative justice, I think is the term.
Pre-crime, right? Pre-crime.
Yeah, it's a P.K. Dick novel. And we're supposed to believe that you can decide that somebody, I mean, that certainly violates the Constitution. I mean, constitutionally, you have to have done some crime and you have due process before law is applicable. But in this case, it looks like it's just a matter of you might be dangerous. And I guess the interesting thing is that's all done ex parte. So you don't even get a speech. You know, somebody comes in, maybe it's an ex-wife, maybe it's a family member that doesn't like you, but it can also be your psychologist or your psychiatrist, and it can easily be police officers who believe they have a good reason to classify you as having extreme risk. So we call this the extreme risk protection orders. And from that, they have an ex parte hearing on whether to suspend your Second, Fourth, and 14th Amendment rights. You're not even there. No due process for you. And as an article that was written by Gun Owners of America says, the standard is not whether there's probable cause to believe that a gun owner has committed a crime, as the Constitution would require. Rather, the standard is some subjective determination about whether the gun owner represents some danger. So, there we are. We're in the Minority Report. And then, you can see all kinds of examples, like the state of Washington, in particular the city of Seattle, has gone crazy with their gun confiscation. And I believe I read someplace, I don't have it in front of me, where out of 29 gun confiscations, 28 of them were done ex parte. So, the person involved with so what this means to me, it means that I can be suddenly identified as being crazy or mentally unstable because, after all, I believe nobody died at Sandy Hook. And
somebody just doesn't like what you're saying, Jack. So they report you as a threat, that you're dangerous because they're offended by what you say. It's all subjective. It has no objective basis, and yet they will act on the basis of these essentially hearsay reports, unsubstantiated by any evidence whatsoever, giving you no opportunity to defend yourself against these malicious charges.
Absolutely. And the worst part is, I read the laws. I read Maryland's law. I'm particularly fond of the crap they generate. And, you have a right to get your gun back, but the hoops that you're going to have to jump through in order to, first of all, they want to take it away for at least a year. And then after that, you have to petition the court, and you have to make some sort of, promises that whatever caused you to get in that shape the first time isn't going to happen again. But I know how the states work. I mean, once they get their hands on your weapon, it's not coming back. It's not coming back without a lot of money spent. And a lot of people don't have that kind of money. They don't have the ability to hire an attorney. And what the typical attorney now is $200 an hour. And then to go through all the rigmarole of the state's gun laws, which I think was brilliant what you said in the video, the Parkland shooting video, I believe it was, unraveling the details. You gave a list.
The Parkland puzzle, how the pieces fit together?
Yeah. Yes, that was just amazing. And I believe it was in there where you gave a listing of just some of the laws that are involved in having a handgun or a gun in Maryland in general, and how many of those laws you'd have to break to save somebody's life. Or in the case that that school resource officer was able to shoot the person at the school immediately, should indicate to anybody with a sane mind that a rational person with a weapon in his hand is your best friend. And I know in my own county, the sheriff, who's a friend of mine, told me, we love the fact that almost everybody in Mineral County has a concealed carry permit. And the reason being is it gives them extra comfort in a situation where they may be involved with something. Well, the funny thing about...
Jack, it reduces their workload to practically zero because the crime rate goes way down, so they don't have to be pursuing bad guys because they aren't in the position to perpetrate their crimes. Let them go somewhere else. Let them go to Maryland, for God's sake, or to California's 15th district, where Eric Swalwell wants to put up a sign, gun-free zone. Come here and shoot us up all you like. We're not going to defend ourselves.
Absolutely. And these gun-free zones are real convenient when it comes to these false flag shootings or fake shootings, as some of them or quite a few of them are. And, when you start thinking about every major bit of legislation that's ever been created against guns, you find out that 90+% of it has been introduced by Jewish people. And every argument they use is based on some false flag event. I mean, you start with the Kennedy assassination and the long rifle with Oswald, and he got it in the mail, and oh my God, just one bit of nonsense after another. And then they stand on these fake arguments, puffing up what I call a fake reality, and then the news media is filled with it 24/7. I mean, there's still people out there talking about Sandy Hook like it happened, and I guess some people still don't know that it didn't happen. But every time I hear it, I have to turn whatever I'm listening to off, because it makes me sick. And, so Americans are under a form of mind attack that runs 24/7. In fact, it's like a simulation, a fabricated environment that's creeped over reality in the last 300 years. And after 9/11, the connection between reality and what we perceive as reality is gone. We get fake news, fake events, made-up history, fake science, scientism. We get manufactured for theft-only economics. The monetary system is designed to steal and nothing else. The markets that we pretend every day go up and down are 100% phony. There's no price discovery. We get manufactured disease, and then we get the symptoms, and then we're told we got to go buy the medicine. And this is just a reality modification, and it feels like our life has become a prison cell. I mean, we're basically living in a Truman Show, where everything that we see and hear is propaganda and total nonsense, and most of it designed to create fear and further control and move people into a tighter and tighter little shell.
And of course, they're cracking down. They're cracking down on the internet, freedom of speech. You can hardly say a word about Sandy Hook without being censored. People have had, I've had dozens of my own videos taken down. People who interview me have had their videos taken down. Several of them have been taken off the air. Richie Allen had this internationally acclaimed talk show to Europe. After he did an interview with me about Parkland, he was taken off the air. Mike Adams, they used their algorithms and found an old interview he'd done with me after the book Nobody Died at Sandy Hook was banned back in 2015. They took him off. He lost 2,700 videos. He's back on the air, and he's going to establish an independent platform. They're doing this. Carrie Cassidy did interviews with me. She's been hit again and again and again. It's completely outrageous. I mean, Jack, it's beyond belief what they're doing to the American people for exercising their freedom under the Second Amendment, using these social media that were concocted by the CIA to spy on us, including Facebook and Google, in order to implement the tyranny of the state. It is beyond disgusting.
And you mentioned censorship, but censorship is a critical component, and we've always had increasing censorship. When I became aware of the world being, absolutely ridiculous compared to what it ought to be, this is in the 70s. I'm waking up, and you can see creeping censorship, first with the newscasts and then eventually with the history that's taught in school and so forth. But right now we're in the end game. I mean, you had an article the other day from some guy named Dave Martin about Amazon censorship, and I think it was Kevin Barrett at Veterans Today had another article looking at Amazon, as a result of, I suppose, the most dangerous mind in America. They've removed all of their references to World War II revisionism, and anything that has to do with the Holocaust, for example, that's not telling their story. That narrative is gone, and I find that just very, 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 very frightening. I mean, for example, how do we know? Google can purge whatever they want off the internet while I'm asleep, and this machine is running around the clock. I think 10,000 YouTube videos were taken down in a course of several months back earlier this year. And these things just vanish from history. They go down a memory hole, and then young people grow up and they don't even know something like that existed. And it's incredible. And I like to segue into this idea that we're standing at a very critical time in history, because we have two factions, two forces. One is that people are waking up, and no, most of the people aren't waking up, but enough people are waking up, and that's all it takes is a sizable percentage of the population. Some say between 5 and 10% waking up, and they can make changes. And at the same time, we have the enemy, which has all the money that can be made on earth. They can print any amount they want. They have control of all the militaries. They manufacture all the food. They manufacture all the media. They manufacture all the news. And they are the enemy, and they are very, very concerned. And a few other things have come along to make this a destabilizing situation, in that we are now in an era where we have learned something about decentralized technologies. And I'm talking mainly about blockchain. And of course, the first version was Bitcoin, but Bitcoin is just one of of thousands.
Jack, to stay on the censorship for the time being, you make impeccable points about Amazon. In mid-2017, the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, which is the intellectual arm of the Mossad, asked Jeff Bezos, who owns Amazon.com, to get rid of all the books that had anything to do with the Holocaust that was at all discrepant with the official version of 6 million Jews having been put to death in gas chambers using Zyklon B. He did it.
Right.
He took out hundreds of books, including one of mine, and I suppose we didn't go to the moon either, because we demonstrate there. I have chapters by Thomas Dalton, who published a brilliant book called The Holocaust Debate, by Robert Foresson, who's done some of the best work on the real history of World War II of all time, including an article I want to recommend entitled The Zundel Trials, 1985 and 1988, because Ernst Zundel was a great Canadian and patriot who denied the Holocaust. He was put on trial in 1985 that the prosecution could not produce a single witness who could testify having seen anyone put to death in a gas chamber. And in 1988, the second round was even more sensational, where the defense produced an expert on gas chambers by the name of Fred Luchter, who'd gone to Germany, inspected the facilities there, came back with a 135-page report and 13 samples demonstrating conclusively none of the facilities were suitable to serve as a gas chamber. The whole thing is nonsense. The whole thing is ridiculous. Because this historical fiction has been used to justify the creation of the nation of Israel, they are adamant about preserving it. They'll prosecute people who simply observe that the facts are inconsistent with their claims, including, for example, that there were 236 references to 6 million Jews being in dire straits or fear of loss of their lives in the international media beginning in 1890. All before the Nuremberg Tribunal, which had no historical or empirical basis whatsoever. It all seems derived from a disputed passage in Leviticus that's been interpreted as meaning the chosen people can return to the promised land only when they're minus 6 million who have been consumed in the flames. But even that requires an interpolation because there was no word for 6 million in the original Hebrew, and where the International Committee of the Red Cross was keeping meticulous records on all the camps, including the ages, the sex, the nationality, the religion, the ethnicity of those who died there. In 1993, they recalibrated their number, and the grand total was 286,081 who died from all causes combined, none of whom were put to death in a gas chamber using Zyklon B. None.
And more Catholics died than Jews.
More Catholics died than Jews. You're 100% correct. At Auschwitz. And they had, if you look at a map of Auschwitz, they had a woodworking shop, they had a symphony for musical production, they had a hospital with OB/GYN facilities. Would you believe that hundreds of babies were born in these camps, which is simply absurd if they were centers for extermination? They did use Zyklon B on the inmates to kill body lice because it was spreading typhus and dysentery through the camps, and they wanted to maintain their health. These were labor camps, and you can't get work out of a corpse.
They had a really nice Olympic-sized swimming pool, and they would have they offered or requested that people come and draw paintings on the walls to make the children happier. And this is outstanding stuff that's still available. I think if you walk through Auschwitz now, you still see photographs that have images of the pool and people involved with competitions that they had. It's just a travesty what's been done in Germany and the German people over something that never happened.
That's right. That's right. Another historical myth, like Sandy Hook, like the Boston bombing, like Las Vegas, like Parkland. Parkland was another, I hate to say it, another Jewish psyop. Debbie Wasserman Schultz, whose district is adjacent, who has a daughter who attends a Broward County school, was the producer of this event. Dina Katz, who's a Hollywood Jewish producer of Dancing with the Stars, she was the director. She's organized many of these marches before. The sheriff, Scott Israel, the first Jew elected the sheriff of Broward County. He campaigned citing the Talmud, Jack. These were the principal conspirators in bringing us the Parkland event, and guess what? The sane progressive, this wonderful woman who's done brilliant videos on Las Vegas and on Parkland, has gone over all the footage from Parkland again and again and again, and she can't find the 3,500 students that were supposed to be there. I've observed before, you should have had hundreds of videos because everyone has a cell phone with its own camera. It didn't happen for the simple reason they weren't there. It turns out that the counties in Florida were letting their students out early at 1 p.m. on Valentine's Day. That was what appears to have happened at Parkland. So it was only a couple of dozen students that stayed behind that serve as the crisis actors that were, for example, in a classroom, from which we do have a video released by Live Leaks, 52 seconds long. They're doing their best to pretend to be crying, but they're also worried about their bottled water, which is absurd if it were real. Another's looking at her iPod. A kid is pulling his putts. You see on the floor what looks initially like a body, but you look closer, it's a training dummy. It has no arms, it has no head, and it's lying in a pool of fake blood. And there are people in police uniforms rushing in and out, but they're actors too. We know because Parkland gave up its police force in 2004. They don't have any cops. They were all actors too. American people, wake up. They had to permit for the March for Your Life 6 months or more in advance. They permitted for the march on the 25th of March, knowing that the Parkland event would be used as its justification on the 14th of February. I mean, this is insultingly bad, Jack, insultingly bad.
It's incredible. And a friend of mine sent me an email recently, last couple of days, that he obtained from the National Education Association. In other words, it was emailed to him. It starts out, friend, when 17 people were shot and killed in my high school, I knew our country needed to change. And this thing goes on and on and on. Never again should anyone have to go through that awful experience. In the hours and days after I found my voice, holding our elected officials accountable for laws they failed to pass that enabled the tragedy to take place. At the same time, through student-led protests and the March for Our Lives, millions of other students also have found their voice. But if we really want to change the world, we have to act. Yet only half of the 18 to 24-year-olds are registered to vote. We need to do better than that. And it goes on here.
Jack, you're putting your finger on it. The whole damn thing was the March for Our Lives was a Democratic voter registration drive that got billions in free publicity from the major networks. It is unbelievable the way the American people are being played for saps, for suckers, for morons. They're playing us for morons.
Well, they're not playing you and me for morons, but they're playing, a lot of people are being played. And it's got, at some point you have to reconnect with morality. You can't live your life as a good person and sell out your progeny. You can't sell out the future, give up your own life and therefore everyone else around you because you can't protect them based on some feelings that were manufactured for you to have. They're just pretend feelings that these women marching and moms for whatever against everything. Those aren't even their thoughts. They're being manipulated and controlled. It seems like it would make me angry if I found that out.
And Jack, by the way, in the part when you were out of, disconnected on the phone, I was pointing out that what you were talking about in history has been confirmed by the University of Hawaii's Democide Project, where they have determined that in the 20th century there were 19 genocides, all of which were preceded by gun confiscation. So this guy here, this Eric Swalwell from California's 15th District, he wants to make the United States number 20.
Absolutely. And if you look at the history of South Africa, and you just jump there for a second, but it was somewhere in the mid-90s, 94 or so, when they were convinced to hand over their country to a communist in the African National Congress, Nelson Mandela. And then they began turning in their weapons to the new government. And now they're bringing, right now the white farmers are targeted and subjected to waves of barbaric murders, And the government, instead of protecting them, they're allowing these barbaric murderers to seize their farms without any compensation and distribute them to favored groups. And nobody talks about it. I mean, the plight of the South African, the Boer, the white South Africans, is not mentioned hardly at all, if ever, on any kind of mainstream media. And you have to search far and wide. For example, you can go to Red Ice TV and Hendrik, has a lot of coverage of the genocide. But whites are being wholesale genocide in South Africa. The former president there would organize outdoor events in football stadiums and sing with the crowd, "We're going to kill the Boer. We're going to chase them down. We're going to shoot them as they run." And everyone's just swaying and having a great time because they don't see these people as people now. And this happens, and it will happen. Whites got to understand that they're already marginalized in their own country. You can't even look at an advertisement anymore and see any whites in them. Every race is fine with me. But the thing is, a nation with 60% white people ought to have a large percentage of representation in anything that's presented to the national media. And yet that's not what we see. And we see our movies populated in ways that don't match the population at all.
Yeah, I agree. They're using advertising for social engineering here, too. Look how frequently you find interracial couples in ads. It's just staggering to me. They're more, I'm all for Black Americans, and I want every Black American to succeed. But there's a stunning overrepresentation of Black Americans in advertising in the United States today. It's fairly astonishing.
It's incredible. And so we're being attacked by a media that has been usurped. It is entirely scripted. It is fake events. It is false news to support fake events. And it presents ideas that have been created outside of that organization through think tanks that have nothing to do with the organization. And everything Americans see in the mainstream media is not there except that it has some effect on the agenda. Those minutes are very expensive. And every one of those minutes are being used to move Americans to the position they're in now, which is to almost be ready to disarm and, I suppose, get down on their knees and get ready for the sword, because that's all that's left here. I mean, where do white people go when their country's gone? What is this? Is this America anymore when it's not their country, when we've been populated by hostile cultures with incompatible ideas and ways in which they live their lives? You look at Europe and Sweden and the rape rate, yet none of those people can be armed. In fact, they're so mentally damaged.
They're excusing immigrants from violent rapes of white women in Sweden on the ground that it's a cultural difference, and they're not even prosecuting them, if you can believe that. Let me just, we're going to a break, but we're going to take calls. 715-245-5975. 715-245-5975. Jack and I are here.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
In breaking news, a visiting Syrian diplomat reported today that their population is evolving rapidly and advancing into a fifth-dimensional consciousness. They are seeking peace with all cosmic cultures, which may mean that the Earth will be asked to join the prestigious Galactic Federation of Light Alliances. Please join Debbie West and Michael Hathaway on Lost Knowledge, Saturdays, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in Studio A. for the latest breaking news on the Star Visitor's peaceful contact and the ongoing project of cleansing the Earth.
Who are you?
I am the architect. I created the Matrix. I've been waiting for you.
Why am I here?
You are the eventuality of an anomaly which, despite my sincerest efforts, I have been unable to eliminate from what is otherwise a harmony of mathematical precision, which has led you inexorably here.
You haven't answered my question.
The Matrix is older than you know. As you are undoubtedly gathering, the anomaly is systemic, creating fluctuations in even the most simplistic equation.
Choice. The problem is choice.
Right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. Be here Wednesday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern Time for Private Eye Matrix Revealed with Monique Lassard.
Even the government admits that 9/11 was a conspiracy. But did you know that it was an inside job? That Osama had nothing to do with it? That the Twin Towers were blown apart by a sophisticated arrangement of mini or micro nukes? That Building 7 collapsed 7 hours later because of explosives planted in the building? Barry Jennings was there. He heard them go off and felt himself stepping over dead people. The U.S. Geological Survey conducted studies of dust gathered from 35 locations in Lower Manhattan and found elements that would not have been there had this not been a nuclear event. Ironically, that means the government's own evidence contradicts the government's official position. 9/11 was brought to us compliments of the CIA, the neocons in the Department of Defense, and the Mossad. Don't let yourself be played. Read America Nuked on 9/11. Available at moonrockbooks.com. That's moonrockbooks.com.
This is Thomas, a.k.a. a Mad Painter. I'd like you to join me Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Open Canvas. Don't forget to bring an open mind.
Yes, folks, that's right. Bring an open mind to an open canvas. Again, that is Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern. UFOs to government corruption. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Most guys freeze. That's your cerebral cortex looking for an answer it doesn't have.
See? Even your brain knows you're screwed.
The body's filling with adrenaline right now, whether you know it or not. Your heart's beating fast. It's getting a little harder to breathe. The neurobiological system is telling you to run, but your knees are too weak to move.
Fear is not real. The only place that fear can exist is in our thoughts of the future. It is a product of our imagination, causing us to fear things that do not at present and may not ever exist. That is near insanity. Do not misunderstand me. Danger is very real, but fear is a choice. We are all telling ourselves a story.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. 100% listener-supported radio. Reporting to danger. Unafraid. Right here, where information never sleeps. Revolution Radio.
Hello, my name is Mr. Rowe. I am the host of Reality Extraction on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I utilize logic, intellect, and magic to methodically autonomize, vivisect, analyze, examine, study, scrutinize, and extract an essence of reality from a fog of illusion and confusion. You can find me on Studio B every Thursday at 1700 hours Pacific Time. That's 8 p.m. Eastern. No topic taboo, no subject too strange. I strive to take a neutral standpoint during the dissection of the topic at hand. That's Reality Extraction with Mr. Rowe on Revolution Radio.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
This is Jim Fetzer, your host on The Raw Deal with my special guest today, Jack Mullin. We have a caller on the line, Jack, but before we go there, I just want to emphasize that these attacks on the First and Second Amendment are related, that they're attacking and censoring the use of the Internet to expose the false flag, Sandy Hook, San Bernardino, Las Vegas, Parkland, because those are being used, those staged, phony, orchestrated events are being used as a motivation or incentive to instill fear into the population, to make us more amenable to manipulation, to promote their agenda of gun control. So when we're exposing these as total charades, phony, fake, and I highly recommend, for example, you check out How to Spot a False Flag, a sampler of orchestrated events where I go through over a dozen, including JFK and 9/11. It's on 153news.net, 153news.net, how to spot a false flag. Because you have to fortify yourself intellectually so you can spot them when they happen too. I'm explaining that using more than a dozen examples. I break it down into like 10-minute segments. So I talk about a key feature that exposed it as a false flag. I begin with Nice, France. Then I talk about another for 10 minutes, turning to Boston as a false flag. Then I turn to another, Parkland as a false flag, and show how they use it, Parkland techniques they used in Nice and in Boston in order to do the Parkland event. I do that so you can stop and start again. You don't have to watch the whole thing continuously. You can do it in little bites as you have opportunity. How to spot a false flag. It's at 153news.net where YouTube can't get at it. We have a caller from the 303 area code. Caller, please give us your name and join Jack and me.
Yeah, this is George from Denver. Again, I don't want to stay on the line very long because you guys are doing such a great job, but I want to call to your attention and any listeners that you have that Mark Levin apparently has a new show on Fox. I watched an interview with where he's has is it Devin Nunes?
Yeah.
Who's the I guess the chairman of the Intelligence Committee
for the House of Representatives.
Yes, and this is about a 35 to 45 minute interview. I think it is absolutely fantastic. People really need to check that out. I've hardly seen anything better, where they go into how the intelligence services, the FBI, NSA, and so on and so forth, were infiltrating the Trump campaign. It's classic, actually. I mean, it's no secret, really, that they have moles inside of all of these political organizations. I mean, I think, going way back, anytime I go to any kind of public meeting on anything, that involves a group of people related to some political persuasion, you can almost be certain that there's somebody in the crowd is a member of the FBI, and they're an informant. I mean, it's just well known that that's how these people operate. Well, anyway, they go into how these informants were embedded into the Trump campaign, and then they used the Steele dossier to obtain the FISA warrants and so on and so forth. And all of that, it seems like the public's memory is so short because prior to the election, when they thought Hillary, the anointed person, the coronation of Hillary, that was going to be a certainty, that Barack Obama was assuring us that the election system was sound and safe and so on, and then immediately after Hillary loses, all of a sudden it's the fault of the Russians. It's just amazing.
George, the absurdity, the endless stream of bullshit coming from the mainstream media, especially from the MSNBC and CNN, is just mind-numbing. How they go on and on about this nonsense, trying to reconstruct or salvage this whole Russian hacking narrative, which is utterly fallen apart. Devin Nunes has played a crucial role here. I admire him beyond words because he has been savagely attacked by shills like this Adam Schiff, who creates a Schiff storm every opportunity, attacking Nunes and demonizing Trump. You're spot on, George, and I'm very pleased with everything you're telling us here. This Mark Levin, I understand, is really quite a formidable guy. He's got a good mind, and he keeps the issues clear and drives right to the heart of the matter.
Levine, I think his name's pronounced Levine, but yeah, he's an attorney, apparently has a legal background, and he's really good. And, well, he's been good on this issue for going back a long time. That said, I'm not a fan of Mark Levin because he's too right-wing for me. But nevertheless, he's fantastic on this particular issue. So that's really the only
What's his view on Israel and Palestine, George? That's going to be a key litmus test.
I don't really know. I think it's pretty obvious he is a Jew, as far as I know. So I don't know. I don't really know.
Well,
on that.
Listen to him. I have a friend who's more to the right than I, for sure, who's extolled his virtues on occasion. But I like what you're saying in relation to his interview with Devin Nunes, who's one of the real white hats in Washington, D.C. today.
Well, that's a must listen to. I mean, if people take one thing away from this show today, they should listen to that interview because it really exposes what has been going on for the past year, and it's terrible.
George,
I want to thank you for letting me call in.
George, I want you to stay on the line. I want Jack to make comments and for you to have a conversation. Jack, speak up.
I'm just listening. I mean, obviously, we're getting to the end of this Trump-Russia thing, but you've heard my position before on this. I'm not certain that that's not staged either, and so I don't know whether it's going to go away. I mean, it's something that may continue.
It is staged. There's no question about it. If you listen to it's absolutely staged. It's 100% staged. It's nothing but stage. The whole thing's a complete contrivance. Period. But it's worse than that. I mean, well, it's similar. I mean, you have the agencies of the deep state carrying out not just a psyop; they're actually carrying out an actual infiltration of a political campaign to take it out. I mean, it's a complete. You talk about the Russians destroying the political process. What about the FBI? What about the NSA? What about Google? What about Amazon? Like you're saying.
George, wonderful. This is one of your best calls ever, and I always love having you on the air. I think you're making very, very telling points that there's a corrupt core with the FBI and the Department of Justice that contrived this whole business. They were playing funny little games. They were planting little seeds they could claim to have discovered but were completely fabricated in order to justify getting a FISA warrant to put the Trump campaign under surveillance to try to destroy his candidacy from the beginning. It's outrageous,
Well,
George.
There's no question about it, and that's what the Levin interview discloses. I mean, that's why it's so important. Hey, if I could go back to this Holocaust deal, one thing that comes to my mind, I'd just like to make this point. I checked this out. I'm here in Denver metro area, and the population of the Denver metro area is 3 million people. And that includes, I believe, the city and county of Denver proper, and then Aurora, Littleton, Englewood, Westminster, probably as far as Boulder, even maybe Fort Collins, and so on and so forth. Okay, it's a very large area. It takes a long time to drive around it, and so on and so forth. It's loaded with people. Okay, that's 3 million people. Now, if you were to kill 6 million people, you'd have to kill twice the population of the entire metro area of Denver, Colorado. It's logistically totally impossible, impractical. I mean, I don't know how could you possibly get rid of the bodies? I mean, it's just not in the cards.
George, that's an impeccable point. That's an impeccable point. The amount of energy taken to cremate a human body is so substantial that if anything remotely approximating what is claimed to have occurred in the Holocaust had taken place, it would have been at least 10 years of constant burning to cremate the bodies, at least 10 years. The whole thing is absurd in every possible way.
Well, I think that you brought up the maps of Auschwitz, or the plans. I think they had at best 6 crematoriums, maybe only 3. It's really not possible, period. I mean, it's just no. I mean, what you bring up about the amount of energy required is it's incredible, but the facilities just didn't exist. It's just
that's right. That's right. The Fred Luchter. I tell everyone who has any doubt about it, read Robert Faurisson, Faurrison, French name, Robert Faurisson, the Zundel trials. You can find it online, 1985 and 1988. George, thanks for an excellent call. We have several callers joining in now. I thank you for calling, George. I'll take a call from area code 408. Please give us your name and identify your state.
Yeah, this is Adolf Hitler. I'm calling from Patagonia, Argentina. It's a very beautiful forested and mountainous region
Hitler does appear to have
south of Argentina.
Argentina. So, Paul, I think you're right on that. Go ahead.
I've managed to survive to the age of 132 based upon a very strict vegetarian diet, yoga, and meditation.
Go right ahead, Paul. I know you have some words
So, in regards
wisdom.
to your previous caller, George, so I'll just warn you, I drive around a little bit, listen to afternoon talk radio. Mark Levin, or whatever the hell he calls himself, he's a nationally syndicated Jewish talk show host. And why don't you go ahead, George, or anybody else, give him a call and try to bring up the Holocaust and the fact that it was a hoax, or try to bring up 9/11 and say that it was the Mossad in cooperation with our own intelligence agencies instead of Arab terrorists. And why don't you see how that goes?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't care who he interviews or what he says. Nothing he does is important. Okay.
Paul,
if you want,
look, I like your call. You're making this point because I was much too hasty. It was impressions I had from a friend of mine who I respect. We have lots of differences, lots of interesting exchanges. I ought not to have offered an endorsement of this guy because I believe you are correct. I've actually never listened to one of his shows, so I ought not to have spoken so hastily. Please continue.
Well, sure. It would be similar to listening to Michael Savage. I mean, certainly you've heard him. And, of course, I have heard many of his shows in the Bay Area, even before he became, as big as he is, national syndication. And, you can often find yourself agreeing with points that they're making. All right. There's no doubt about that. There's a lot of things that Mark Levin would say or points that he makes where that's agreeable. But where do they come out on the truth? Okay,
yeah,
because I've had, Yeah, and I've had the same opinion, and I'm not very forgiving of people, and I don't know if I even should be, okay?
Yeah.
I'm not tolerant at all of complete and total ignorance and stupidity.
Yes.
Because all you have to do nowadays with the Internet is just a tad bit of work. You don't have to read books. You don't have to make a study of anything. Just reveal the first few, shall we say, falsehoods or the first few unlikely things of any of these events, and you can start to question, well, wait a minute, is it really the way it happened? Are we being told the truth? And it doesn't take that great of a mind or even that logical of a mind to reach the basic conclusions. And so when you bring up things, and people have tried to bring these things up with Savage or Mark Levin, and I've heard their reaction. It's ridiculous. It's like trying to bring it up with Bill Maher. Okay, you've seen him on his HBO show, right?
Yeah.
What does he think of 9/11 truthers? Okay.
Yeah.
However, George did make an interesting point, and it reminds me of a personal story. So fairly early on, I would say in the early to mid 2000s of the so-called 9/11 truth movement, I used to go to these meetings. They were often held at, for whatever reason, some form or another of a Unitarian church. And they were organized by various people, and there was various stages of awakening, shall we say. And at the time, there was a sort of a schism between the no-planers and the people that believed that there were hijacked airliners that hit the towers.
Sure.
And so I quickly gravitated towards the no plane because that just, made the most sense as far as the way I was looking at it. And I didn't even know a lot of the stuff that I would learn subsequently. Well, there was one particular meeting that was kind of interesting. There was one fairly loud and outspoken fellow, and he kept insisting, at the end of the meeting and during the group discussions that we can't go the no planes route, that would just cause too much division and too much controversy. And, he just, something about him, he stunk.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Some people, they just smell.
Yeah.
And I remember taking a very, very aggressive stance when I heard, because he was taking over is what he was doing. And I felt pretty confident because I was bigger than him. It's one of those things to say. And I go, hey, look, you can think whatever you want to think, okay, and say whatever you want to say, but why don't you just shut your mouth and let people form their own opinions, and so on and so forth. There was actually quite a bit of rancor in the air, right?
Good.
Well, interestingly enough, when I left this meeting, and I swear this is exactly what happened, was sort of in a remote part of Oakland, actually, and I was walking back to my car, and I noticed this man with which I'd had a disagreement, and the man that was taking over the meeting trying to, tell us we can't go the no planes route, and he was in a car with a couple other guys, and he was eyeballing me. He was giving me what some people would call the mad dog stare.
Or the evil eye.
And yeah, just kind of, he'd like circled the block one time and just watched me as I got in my, I got in my truck and drove away. And I thought, isn't that interesting? I didn't really have a firm suspicion, but of, who he might have been, and he may have been a so-called operative. I have no idea. But that did indeed occur, and I just found it to be, something of note.
Well, Paul, the classic mix is 80-20. In other words, disinformation, 80% true, 20% false. But you make it, the payload is the 20% false, obviously. And, Mark Levin appears to be exemplar there. I think George caught him on a good day, where Devin Nunes was, a major source of truth about all this Russian hacking, complete rubbish, and the corruption of the FBI and the Department of Justice. So I think he caught him on a good day. But I think your point is almost certainly correct. You and George both know more about that particular fellow than do I, and I appreciate both of you for the points you've made. Anything you'd like to add further, Paul?
Just what I've said. I mean, I've listened to more than dozens of shows, many, probably over 100 or so of Michael Savage over time, because they've both been on for a long time, and I've heard Mark Levin dozens and dozens and dozens of times, and he's easy to like if you, for example, hate the liberals and hate the Democrats and so on and so forth, and he does make He doesn't make some good points on the economy, but he's a complete and total Jewish shill, and he has a syndicated national show. So that's all you need to know.
Yeah.
You could never discuss with him the Federal Reserve. You could never discuss with him the whole truth about the war on terror. You could never discuss with him any of these false flags. I challenge George or anybody who wants to go ahead and give him a call and see what kind of reaction you get.
Excellent points, Paul. Excellent points. And, you know, I find it very odd that I'm now taking after these loony liberals who want to ban guns. I mean, I just am just dumbfounded by their efforts because it would grossly weaken the nation's security. You know, I mean, it's a betrayal of the Constitution. It not only is going to leave yourself helpless to defend yourself, because the police, you know, you'd call the police if you felt you were threatened. Why? Because they have guns. But the police response can take as much as 20 minutes. The mayhem tends to occur in the first 5 or 6. So while you're waiting for the police to come because you don't have guns to defend yourself because these Democrats passed laws that took them away from the law-abiding citizens, your daughter may be raped, your wife may be killed, you may be mugged. I mean, it's insane. If you're willing to let other people determine your own fate, whether you live or die, then give up your guns. But if you care about defending yourself and exercising your right under the Constitution, by God, don't be taken in, don't be played by a sucker. And this guy, Eric Swalwell from California's 15th, is just a disgusting cretin. He's on my political hit list. He's betraying the United States. Paul, another excellent call. I really appreciate every time you call in. I want to thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Jim,
let's take another caller from the 708 area code. 708.
No, I don't think I'm on mute.
Yep. Are you on 708? I've got you now. Speak up.
I just wanted to say, you know, I agree with Paul. When somebody starts speaking, you can quickly get a gut feeling as to whether it's disinformation or not, simply by just a few historical references, you know, to World War II or events in the Middle East today. So the Holocaust is a great tip-off for me. If I hear someone immediately reciting the 6 million Jews murdered in Germany, I know for a fact that I'm dealing with somebody that either is without a clue or has decided that he's going to present some information that you may find attractive, but on the other hand, he's using it as a vessel to insert, you know, dangerous stories. And I wanted to add to before you go on, one other interesting thing about the Holocaust is if you look at the census in 1934, I think, you look at the number of Jews on Earth, it was something like 15,200,000. And then the census done in 1946 placed the number of Jews on Earth at something like 15,600,000. So there was a 400,000 or thereabout increase in the number of Jews. That doesn't really fit very well with
6 million having been exterminated. Yeah. That's right.
No, it doesn't.
In fact, I've heard estimates, Jack, that said that there weren't 6 million Jews in all of Europe altogether. And, of course, I mean, they weren't all in Germany, and they most certainly weren't all in concentration camps. The whole thing is really ridiculous beyond words, and yet this is why they have to pass laws so that in Germany, if you said the things you and I have been saying here on the air today, they would come after us for prosecution and conviction and incarceration for just expressing unpopular ideas. This is Jim Fetzer, your host on The Raw Deal with my special guest, Jack Mullin here. We'll be right back.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Tranquility Base here.
Were they conspiracies?
The Eagle has landed.
Have you ever wondered if we really did go to the moon? If Paul McCartney died in 1966 and was replaced by an even better musician? Did you know that Saddam Hussein died in a B-1 bomber strike on 7 April 2003 and was replaced by one of his doubles, who was put on trial and hanged in his place? Or that Osama bin Laden died in Afghanistan on the 15th of December 2001 and was buried in an unmarked grave in accordance with Muslim traditions? That the raid in Pakistan was faked? There's more, including 4 chapters about the end of World War II, which prove that events we've been taught were very different than we have been told. Don't let yourself be played. Read, and I suppose we didn't go to the moon either. Available at moonrockbooks.com. That's moonrockbooks.com.
Looking for a nightcap to fill your listening needs? Come join us on Spaced Out Radio with me, Dave Scott, right here on Revolution Radio. Monday through Friday for 3 hours a night, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, we will take you down the supernatural path. From ET contact to the paranormal and all of the spiritual, cryptid, and conspiracy stories in between. You can find us right here on Revolution Radio, at spacedoutradio.com, on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, and on Facebook at Spaced Out Radio Show. Spaced Out Radio. It's a night of talk and interaction. Are you experienced?
Even the government admits that 9/11 was a conspiracy. But did you know that it was an inside job? That Osama had nothing to do with it? That the Twin Towers were blown apart by a sophisticated arrangement of mini or micro nukes? That Building 7 collapsed 7 hours later because of explosives planted in the building? Barry Jennings was there. He heard them go off and felt himself stepping over dead people. The U.S. Geological Survey conducted studies of dust gathered from 35 locations in Lower Manhattan and found elements that would not have been there had this not been a nuclear event. Ironically, that means the government's own evidence contradicts the government's official position. 9/11 was brought to us compliments of the CIA, the neocons in the Department of Defense, and the Mossad. Don't let yourself be played. Read America Nuked on 9/11. Available at moonrockbooks.com. That's moonrockbooks.com.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
This is Jim Fetzer, your host on The Raw Deal with my special guest today, Jack Mullin. I love our callers. They're excellent. I want to mention for anyone who still doesn't understand Sandy Hook, what happened there and how we were played, go to BitChute, BITCHUTE. You won't find it on YouTube because all my videos are being scrubbed from YouTube, and they're even taking down those who've interviewed me, even their whole channels. I mean, it's outrageous, beyond ridiculous. Search for Sandy Hook Update. Tracy loses, Wolfgang wins. The deep state strikes back on BitChute. You won't have any doubt in your mind at all about what happened at Sandy Hook after you watch the evidence, because I presented all there, all together, all the visual evidence, inside, outside the school. You'll see the disgusting condition. It wasn't habitable by human beings, much less suitable for having children to attend school in a toxic waste dump. Second, I just want to add before I continue with Jack and our callers, if I'm speaking with an intensity that gives you the impression I think the fate of the nation is at stake, it's because I believe the fate of the nation is at stake, that this gun control business, these attacks on the First Amendment are unconscionable, completely unscrupulous, and they are driven by evildoers who don't want to benefit the United States, but their own political agenda, which has nothing to do with what is best for American citizens. Bear that in mind. I think we have another caller from this. Yeah, Jack, go ahead.
I said, and let's not forget, it's also illegal. I mean, it's unconstitutional. The Second Amendment has no words about the type of weapon and where it'll be carried, not carried, etc. It simply says you have a right to keep and bear. So all of those laws are unconstitutional, and therefore no courts are bound to enforce them. It's just that most people don't have the wherewithal, or court systems themselves don't even understand the Constitution. John Lott said that gun-free zones are magnets for those who want to kill more people quickly. It's natural that the people who want to disarm us would favor the idea of a gun-free zone, because that's going to be self-reinforcing. We're going to find more deaths in a gun-free zone, and as they become more numerous, we'll see more deaths.
And John Lott's a brilliant guy. He has a book entitled The War on Guns you can obtain at Amazon.com. Unlike a couple of mine, 2016, he's one of the real experts on all these issues, and you'll learn how when guns are banned, homicides go up. We have a call, I believe, from the 708 area code. Are you there, caller?
Yes, Professor. If you'd like to take a moment and plug the station, and Jack, if you want to take a moment after that and tell us your information again, I'd appreciate that.
Okay. You want that now?
You go right ahead.
Yeah.
I mean, if you mean my indebtedness to Revolution Radio, which is profound, remember, it is all listener-supported. And bear in mind, one of the best ways, I believe, is to subscribe to the archives. It's just $5 a month. That turns out to be cumulatively $60 a year, but you don't even have to lay out $60. Just $5 a month. I encourage everyone to do that. Jack, I believe he was inviting you to cite your own website and, of course, the government rag.
TheGovernmentRag.com is where almost all of my work is. And again, you can find some of my articles on Jim's blog, jamesfetzer.blogspot.com, and a few other places spattered around. But TheGovernmentRag.com is where most of my work is, and where I continue to write things weekly.
Caller, do you have any questions for Jack or me, or comments you'd like to add?
Oh, of course. Well, excellent conversation today, gentlemen. I appreciate it. Mr. X, good call. And George, bringing it to the table, man. We appreciate that, too. Where do we want to start? Hey, Jim, did you hear recently about this Hawaii false flag that was prevented?
What, do you mean the missile attack?
No. A 38-year-old man was in Hawaii. He's in a hotel, and we got kind of like a similarity to a James Paddock setup here, where it's a 38-year-old man. He was impersonating a police officer or an agent of some sort. He had a badge, and they got him in his room. They got him with guns. I don't know what kind of guns. They got him with 800 rounds of ammunition, and the guy had no explanation other than that they caught him. So whatever was about to happen, they caught onto it and stopped this guy. A 38-year-old guy, had a badge. I'm not sure if it was an official badge or not, but it was about to turn into another Stephen Paddock situation.
And we just had another school. We had another school shooting where the resource officer showed up and took him out. I mean, the way it should be done. I mean, it's insane how the timing for Parkland occurred on a day when the Florida state legislature was considered broadening concealed carry to include teachers. So they timed it in an exquisite fashion. They also were worried because the IT guys, these Pakistani guys who work for Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who'd been spying on Congress with her cover, were coming up for trial. She's worried about losing 11 Democratic seats in the House in Florida alone. So they had to take desperate steps for a desperate situation, and it was faking the attack, using simulated ammunition, phony police officers. The sheriff had to keep 4 deputies out of the school because they weren't in the loop that it was all staged. He was worried they might enter and shoot some of the players by accident, not realizing the whole thing was just according to a script. Please do continue. Yeah, no, that's interesting that they interrupted what would appear to have been another one of these Las Vegas-style shooting events.
Well, I suggest looking into it, doing some research. I just caught it. I forget exactly where I caught wind of it, but I heard it. It sounded legit, what I was hearing, so I don't have any more details on that. moving forward. And not enough people, again, as I said, it was supposed to be a similarity to, like, we know Paddock was this dupe. And we also know, after your finding, that wasn't even Paddock's body in the room. Something pulled out of a freezer. It wasn't him. No airload match. This guy's shorter, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of people that should know better should be talking about that more, but they're not. People are still fighting the official narrative.
Brew, if you want to hear something absurd, the Daily Mail out of the UK has just done a huge spread about Las Vegas, and it's all total phony baloney, but they have a whole lot of photographs. Their initial photograph actually isn't even of Stephen Paddock. Get this, here's what they're saying. This is the headline. Las Vegas gunman was a right-wing conspiracy theorist. Stephen Paddock ranted about Waco, Ruby Ridge, FEMA, and thought the military was planning to kick down doors and confiscate guns. But get this, Brew, nobody's buying it. The comments are just astonishing. They're saying it took them this long to come up with this BS. I mean, nobody's buying it. It's ridiculous.
You can see that there's no real crime in the United States. That's one of the things that when you research, they have to make crime. They can't, it won't come on its own. They can't even try to agent provocateur it. It's just nothing that I can think of that was a massive crime. I mean, yes, there have been school shootings that are real, school shootings larger than any that we've seen so far, but they're very, very far and few between. And it's interesting that, these gun laws are about the same time as these shootings. For example, in Las Vegas, we had the Sportsman Heritage and Recreational Enhancement Act, which was going to pass and was going to allow gun owners to transport registered firearms across state lines, carry guns in national parks. And we also had the NRA bill that was going to reduce the headaches with carry conceal by making all the states have homogeneous.
Reciprocity.
Yep. Yeah. And so both of these are at the same moment that we get, the Las Vegas massacre, and we take over TV with that, and I don't know, none of these things made it. They all were squashed. So
one of the photographs they put in the Daily Mail is one I dissected before. It was in the New York Times originally, appears to be a girl lying on the ground, and there's blood, or what appears to be blood, running across her legs. The problem is it should have been running down her legs. This appears to have been dripped on her after she was lying on the ground. I mean, this is another crisis actor. We have looked at 33 of the videos. There's a lot of sounds of shots. There's no one actually being shot. We even have a video where you have a crisis director come out and have the crisis actors redo their scene. Mona Alexis Presley has not only discovered that the obituaries were based on people who died in different states or on different dates or from different causes of death. She's unearthed the Metropolitan Las Vegas Police crime map for the 1 square mile around the concert area, and it doesn't have anything in the 24 hours from 8 p.m. on the first to 8 p.m. on the second. It doesn't have anything about shooting. It has a disturbance, assault and batter, other disturbance, assault and battery, burglary, stolen motor vehicle, burglary, malicious destruction, other disturbance, recovered motor vehicle, other disturbance, robbery, not one shooting event, which is consistent with my Facebook friend who contacted the 3 closest hospitals to the concert area and asked if they'd had any gunshot admittees, and they all admitted they'd had none, 0, zip, zilch, not a single one, where one of those who answered cheerfully added, "I think you're calling about that drill, but no one was shot. Check with the local police." Drew, I always appreciate your calls. Anything you'd like to add?
Well, as Jack was suggesting, listen for, I think it was Jack, listen for keywords or anything that lets you know that these people are frauds. So the Daily Caller, by putting out a story like that, what else can you trust out of them,
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people go there for information. A lot of they say it's out of the UK, and a lot of people, try and cite their material, but then they come out with this hogwash, you know what I mean? It's ridiculousness.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also to the fact that Jack was mentioning all the way back to JFK and Martin Luther King, they just started making gun laws off of those false flags. We know it was all set up. We know who was involved for the most part, 95% of it at least. And now look what happened. You got your Sandy Hook. 22 different gun laws were passed off of Sandy Hook.
23, actually.
Fake, phony, and false.
23.
Right?
He signed 23 executive
fake,
orders.
Phony, and false.
Yeah.
Fake, phony, and false. 100%. 22 gun laws or 23 gun laws were passed.
Yeah.
And then we got Parkland. What did they do at Parkland? They decided right in that first day, that first press conference, that Talmudic sheriff Israel comes out and starts saying, Baker Act. We need more power in the Baker Act. That was the green light. What was the first people to act on it? Washington State. In Seattle, Washington, they start banging on people's doors saying, we think there's something about you. We're taking your guns.
Yeah.
That was a green light for many of these states or counties or sheriff departments. And they're all in on it. It's a money-making machine, not just to disarm us, but it's a money-making machine.
No, I think those are excellent observations. Jack, did you want to comment before we go to the next caller while we still have Brew on the line?
Well, you're right. And it's coming to, it'll probably show up in most states. It looks like 18 to 24, somewhere in that neighborhood are looking at it now. And it's just another easy, convenient way that they can put a chip in people's rights to own guns, and they can take guns away from people that they believe may be a problem down the road. And there's going to be disappearings. There always is in the terminal stages of a nation under attack like this, and it's happened many times in history. So those people that are most likely to put up resistance and also are known to have guns, because obviously, you can't buy a gun in the United States without having to notify every authority, quote, in the government. So these things, you'll see these people quietly visited at night. We understand that you think nobody died at Sandy Hook, and we're worried about your mental health, and so therefore we got a court order. You weren't there, but it's still all legal. Don't tell me about that Constitution. It's just another goddamn piece of paper.
George W. Bush, yes.
Yeah,
and it's also fair to mention they also use these tactics for CPS to kidnap people's children or their elderly parents and whatnot. And basically it comes down to medical kidnapping, and then they stick them in these foster homes where these kids are abused and they're vaccinated and they're used for medical experiments and so on. So these laws that they pass, we think, it's just for guns, but they use it for multiple purposes because these are bad people. The United States has been usurped. It was usurped a long time ago, as Jim was mentioning, how after 9/11, the Israeli Prime Minister said that they own and control the United States. This is 100% true.
Sad to say.
And we have to stop it.
Say.
It has to be stopped. It has to be reversed, and people got to keep speaking up. And for George, here's a website for you, George. Kodoh, CODOH.com.
Right.
It talks about the gassing
This is a group of revisionist historians. Yes, that's their website. Brilliant stuff. Brew, I can't thank you enough for calling. Thank you enough for calling in, my friend. Very much. We have another caller at the 704 area code. Please give us your name and then speak right up to me and Jack.
Yes, this is Frank in North Carolina. Just returned from Antarctica.
Oh, wow.
And
is it melting, Frank?
Well, it's actually pretty cold down there. And I was down there looking for some people, but I was unable to find them.
Did you find any moon rocks? Werner von Braun conducted an expedition to the Antarctic to collect moon rocks that have been dislodged from the surface of the moon by the impact with small asteroids caught in Earth's gravitational field, brought down to Earth so they could be presented as real moon rocks after the Apollo missions in order to convince the public we'd actually gone, but their mode of transportation had been very different than NASA would claim.
Well, I do hear the urgency, the sense of urgency in your voice, and that's the one thing that I missed from the Marine Corps was that ability to get things done very quickly because they instilled in you from the very beginning that sense of urgency. Everything is life and death, you know?
And it actually,
that's one thing I miss.
And in this case, in fact, it is the case. That's exactly the deal. The fate of the nation does hinge on these issues. Believe it or not, take my word for it, that's the way it is.
I agree with some of the previous callers that Levine is an Israeli shill. He wouldn't be in the position that he was unless he was safely protecting the agenda, the overall larger agenda, and just like people like Michael Savage and others. But hey, I'm sorry, I couldn't understand the guest, Jack. Your last name. What is your last name?
Mullin. M-U-L-L-E-N.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Frank.
Okay. Well, it's been very refreshing to hear this guest. I don't recall ever having heard him before, but I'd like to hear a lot more of him out there. He's spot on everything that he said as far as I'm concerned, and it's just refreshing to hear, and I hope that people will stay tuned after this show ends, and we'll carry over to Studio A and listen to Dennis Fecchio. He gives the enemy no quarter, and he's very, very intelligent. If you've never heard him, you'll find him very refreshing as well.
And Frank, his show is right after mine, time-wise?
Yes.
Immediate follow. So if you went here from Studio B to Studio 1, you're going to catch his show.
Right. Yeah, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. on Thursdays. That's East Coast time in the States.
Right.
And he's also on Saturday mornings from, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern time on Saturday morning. So.
Well, I appreciate the recommendation. I hope a lot of our listeners will check him out. And from what you say, he sounds to be a very worthwhile guy to hear.
Oh, he's great. He's great, and he's paid for it, too. He's paid dearly. But anyway, all right, keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Frank, thanks.
Thank you for the kind words.
Thanks very much for calling in, Frank. Well, we have a lot of excellent callers here. I mean, you had George and Paul and Brew and Frank, Jack. I mean, several of them call rather often, but their commentaries are extremely good, as they were today.
Oh, very good. And, and I enjoy people that are awake. I mean, like that gentleman that was just on, I find myself refreshed when I'm in a group of men that know what's going on and aren't afraid to say it. I mean, because there's a time for BS and looking the other way and whatever, but we're way past that now. And this is a crisis point in history. It is a crisis point for this country. It's a crisis point for white people. I mean, white people are about to become, just an ancient memory and obscurity, and they've done so on their own. They're willingly giving up everything that they created and everything that they have in their history, the legacy to their ancestors, etc. It's a shame. It's shameful to allow others to convince you that you should, hand over your country and all the things that you've built and your culture to a group of people that you don't even know, recognize, and are not your friends. And this always ends bad. The people that promote multiculturalism and diversity are the same people that are promoting the Greater Israel Project, where we have some of the most supremely racist people on planet Earth. And I wanted to get to, and I don't know how much time we have, but we didn't talk about Trump's Jerusalem. But
yeah, go ahead, Jack. Go. We got about 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Okay, I wrote an article, Globalism, Bolshevism's Grand Deception, and you published it for me as well. But in that article, I talked about, Trump's getting things done here that Obama could never get done, and he's moving this plan along, and I have to refer back to Albert Pike's plan, because Albert Pike's plan is, if it wasn't real, if he didn't create this plan, well, it's certainly the plan that they're following. And he predicted the 3 world wars, and the last world war that he predicted would involve basically all of humanity, and it would be done so in the Middle East, and it would use the Jewish people as a weapon against the world to incite global conflict at that point in Israel. And I believe sincerely that Donald Trump is an operative of Israel. Some people, you can read whatever you like. Is he a crypto Jew himself? I don't know. But I do know that his family members are Jewish, and that he surrounds himself with plenty of Jewish help, and he takes good care of Israel. And in this situation, I believe that opening out or bringing the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem and calling that the capital of Israel instead of Tel Aviv is the way in which you put all three Abrahamic religions together and at each other's throat. And you do so only at great peril to everyone. And this can have no benefit for anyone on earth with the exception of Israel, and then only those in the upper echelons, the Chabad Lubavitch and above group that are looking to rule the world from what's left of Israel probably in the end, and use all the other Jews as have been done before as fodder. I mean, they'll be bullet catchers with the rest of them. And while the main ruling group sits somewhere near the city of London or Basel, Switzerland, or wherever their outposts are, and watches this happen. But I believe this is a turning event, and I believe it's indicative of the next step, which is a greater Israel plan. And we're quickly moving into Iran. The story, Trump had to get out of the nuclear deal for only one reason. There's no way you could build a boogeyman out of Iran again when they were in and following a deal made by the left's hero Obama, and they were presenting no problems. So the only possible way you can make an argument to attack Iran is to come up with some sort of reason to say that they're building nuclear weapons again, and we're going to have to get out of this treaty. Even though I don't think Trump legally could do that on his own, he did, but we don't have law anymore. So I believe that we're seeing the movement. The movement is that Israel's going to get a lot larger. They're going to balkanize those states that were predicted by Wesley Clark, and Jerusalem's going to become the final battleground for a much larger war, which will involve Russia, United States, and China. And I believe that all three leaders are in, they're in the loop, and this is being staged, and we're just watching it unfold in real time while all these QAnon people are explaining, 10-degree chess. This is done because of this, which involves this. I mean, these guys are even telling people that the uranium went to Iran, but
isn't that absurd, Jack? Isn't that just as absurd as it gets?
It's just beyond belief, and they tell this story with a serious face. That it ended up in Syria and Iran secretly making sure. That's a stack of BS I can't see over, because we would have heard about that a long time ago. I mean, it's not even rational to talk about. And the Iranian top levels are likely in bed with the New World Order. The people are wonderful people, with a pretty moderate culture that has a history of being learned and civilized, and certainly not violent. I mean, hundreds of years know nothing out of Iran. I don't understand why. I see people that I talk to, and they're like, we got to watch Iran. What for? What have they ever done? Ever? I mean, there's nothing they've ever done. It's like
we haven't launched a war of aggression against another state since 1775. It's the bottom line. Iran is one of the true peace-loving nations in the whole world.
Yep. And so here we are. It's like saying we needed to go to Afghanistan because of Osama bin Laden. I mean, what? It's incredible.
Lies, just the lies, anyway, the monstrousness of the lies, Jack.
Yeah. And the way they're promoted by the media and the gullibility, I think the white brain in this country is susceptible to some sort of
Jack, you've done a great job here on the show today. I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank George and Paul and Brew and Frank for calling in, and all of you out there for listening.
Thank you. I had fun.
Great job.
Appreciate it. Talk to you again soon.
Got it, Jack.